You're listening to the Second Look Podcast, where we take a closer look at what we're learning each Sunday at Connection Church to help you grow in your walk with Christ. Here are your hosts, Pastor Joe Terreri and Pastor Dan DeRochers.
Welcome to The Second Look. My name is Dan.
And I'm Joe.
And we are here talking about a change in perspective. But first, hey, Joe.
Hello, Dan.
I've got a question for you.
I knew you would.
Joe, would you rather donate something to Goodwill or sell it in a yard sale?
Oh, that's the easiest question
Really?
you've ever asked me.
Really?
This is a softball. Finally, a question I immediately know the answer to. I love donating stuff to the Goodwill.
Okay.
Yard sales make no sense to me. We're going to lose people.
I love this.
Yard sales make no sense to me. What are you going to make? $3? Like, just
You didn't even ask what is the item.
It does. Okay. Is it my car? I'll sell it. Okay. But really, I'm willing to give everything away that's under the, is it my car? So everything below car, I'm willing to give away. Because here's why, Dan. I don't want to be bothered with setting up the yard sale. You know what's worse?
Facebook Marketplace.
Yes. It's like, hey, maybe we could get $100 for this. And then you're back and forth for 13 hours arguing with,
Is this still available?
is this still available? Is this still available? I live in Idaho. Will you ship it to me? No. Like, just take it over to Liberty Thrift, give it to those people, let them sell it, let them make the money on it. They're going to do all the... Have you ever been to the back room at Liberty Thrift?
No. Have you?
Yes, it's a disaster zone.
Okay,
it's
careful.
my worst nightmare. There's just
No
old...
offense to any of those listeners, avid listeners who are responsible for the back room at Liberty Thrift.
No. I'm not. No, you don't understand. They have no choice. It's just everyone brings their stuff they don't want anymore, and it's all just there. And then they have to organize it. That's my worst nightmare, is having to do that job. Like, oh, here's something that doesn't have much value. Now I have to organize it? No, just put it in the trashola. So anyway, I just feel like I definitely want to donate pretty much anything. And, you can ask my wife 2 times a year, like it's my religion. I go through my closet, I get rid of things, and I am ruthless. Let me tell you a story, Dan. You didn't know you were going to get this much
I did
out of
not.
this opening question.
Very exciting.
And honestly, if you're a regular listener, you usually fast forward this part anyway. Luis Miro. But anyway, my wife found a pantsuit that she had purchased when she got her first job 20 years ago or 22 years ago. She still had it. And I'm like, what are you doing with this pantsuit? And it was in a bag. It was on a hanger. And she's like, okay, honey, because I was going to Liberty Thrift, can you donate this? And I'm like, nope. Even if you don't have much, you don't want this 22-year-old pantsuit.
Right.
Like, that belongs in the garbage. And so...
Or maybe in an exhibit.
Maybe at the Museum of Natural History. But I just feel like I always want to donate things. And listen, when you go to a yard sale and people who get pumped up about their yard sale finds, here's what the rest of us normal people are thinking. It's not as good as you think it is. You only like it because it was $3 and you're going to personally get rid of it within the next 3 months. But you feel good about it. You need to tell all of us about it. Yard selling can be a hobby, but it's not practical.
This is amazing.
It was too much.
Should we just close the podcast now?
Should we restart? Yeah.
Well, the just thinking about donating things or selling them or cleaning out or trying to loose the tie that binds us in our stuff. Like, we love stuff.
Yeah, we do.
Right? We love things and nice things and convenient things, and some people just like to shop.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and here's what's interesting. I don't like keeping stuff, but as you get older, don't you realize, like, you really do get what you pay for. Right?
Definitely.
Like, I start to realize there's some quality items that I never thought, like, ooh, like if I spend a few extra bucks on this, the difference between this $10, if I pay $10 for this or I pay $20, it's that extra level of comfort. And so, so I'm actually not anti-stuff at all, even with my Goodwill rant and still intact. But we do tend to accumulate a lot of stuff. And maybe we don't have a lot of stuff, but we want to make sure our stuff is really nice. And we all have a weird relationship with stuff.
And yet, stuff, money, wealth, like as accumulating as we tend to be, especially as we get older and we start thinking about the future.
Yep.
Kind of what we're talking about with this sermon out of Luke was that the meaning of life is not accumulation and the pursuit of that moment in time where we just don't have to do anything anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me how Jesus tells the parable and describes how this guy is thinking about what he's going to do with his wealth. And just getting into this place where, it's almost like he starts daydreaming. And his daydreams, like most daydreams do, usually begin to just focus so hardcore on the question, how can I make life better for me? And then Jesus just comes right out and says, you fool. And it's like, I don't know about you, Dan, but like, it's actually jarring for me to hear Jesus look at that attitude and say, you fool.
Yeah.
Because I do think that, and listen, I don't say this in judgment, but I think that is, for a lot of folks, I think that sort of feels like the goal. Like, I want to be able to do, and like I had a conversation with someone over the summer who's not a part of our church, doesn't live anywhere close to here, and I'm not even sure they're following Christ. And I asked them, and they had retired recently. I said, so what are you doing in your retirement? And this gentleman said to me, I like to say I'm doing whatever I want, whenever I want. And that was the end of the conversation. And he sort of laughed, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, sounds nice. But is that the goal?
Right.
And listen, I hope no one heard yesterday that Jesus says you need to work until the day you die.
Right.
It was actually not about working every day. It was about a life of meaning and purpose, and not making it about, I'm going to do what I want when I want. Like, we are not designed for self-absorption. We are designed to serve others, serve God, and for a life of sacrifice.
I love to think about the concept of being a steward, right? And stewarding the resource that God has entrusted to us. And part of good stewardship is managing resources in a way where you can provide, or where God is providing, but where you have your needs provided for, where you are maybe getting to the point where you're retiring from something, but you're retiring to something and continuing that life of purpose and life of service. Like, could you imagine what it would be like to go from having to do something to now getting to commit the rest of your days, and in some cases, some of the prime years of your life, in full dedication and honor to the Lord.
Yes, and that doesn't mean if you do that, you're not allowed to have fun doing it.
Right, sure.
And that doesn't mean you're not allowed to play golf or play pickleball with your friends. Like, I want to be so careful that it's not like I need to go from working my full-time job and going 100 miles an hour into doing 100 miles an hour for something else. It's actually what is Jesus challenging about this man? He's challenging a perspective on how his life is going to be from this point forward, and it's going to be all about me.
Yeah, that's good.
And listen, I mean, I want to just talk about some people that I have just really been impressed by how they've retired. And so you know them, Barry and Barb Banke.
Yep.
I don't think they listen to this podcast, but Barry and Barb Banke, still a part of Connection Church. They helped launch our church so many years ago. They were on the launch team with you, Dan.
Yeah.
And they actually retired from their work in New Jersey, Paramus, New Jersey, and they moved down to this area to help start what at the time was Spring Valley Community Church. And Barry and Barb, they travel. They like to do stuff with their friends. I think they have, from the looks of it, I think they enjoy their friends. They enjoy life. They enjoy doing fun things. But that's not what their life is about.
Yeah, that's
They
good.
enjoy those things, but their life was about the local church. And Barry and Barb spent the retirement years of their life, and continue to do so as God gives them health and strength, to just serve people and have people in their home and lead groups and do fun stuff and gather people together. And I just think about them, and I'm like, that's how I want to do retirement.
Yeah.
I want to have a great time, but I want to have a life of purpose in God's kingdom. And Barry and Barb have modeled for so many people that it's possible to retire in a righteous way.
That's good.
And a righteous way to retire is, my life still belongs to the Lord.
Yeah.
And that's really what we need to think about when we think about retirement. The day is never going to come when God doesn't have first place in our lives, and he doesn't get to set the course for how our lives need to go.
For those of us that aren't there yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Like you and I.
Like the two of us,
Right.
25 years left or maybe more.
If God
and
gives us life.
Right. And so we're in this middle zone, right, where we're not just starting off. We're not at the end. And yesterday I was thinking a lot about sort of, the life does not consist of accumulating money and possessions and those kinds of things. And we talked a little bit about wealth, but these principles, you don't have to feel wealthy or have a net worth to feel these things. And
So important.
You can be obsessed with money and not have a dime, right?
Exactly. And that's why I think it's interesting that Jesus addressed the crowd. He told the parable to the whole crowd because everyone has money issues and everyone has money sickness and everyone has a relationship with money. Again, whether you have a lot or you have a little, because I think we often associate greed with income level, and greed is a condition of the heart, not reflected in a bank account. Because greed is basically wanting to just hoard and keep. And listen, you could not have 2 cents to rub together, but it could be because you've gambled it all away. It could be because you don't want to live on a budget and you're just like, I just need more. And it's like, well, maybe you think you need more, but you could actually live on what you make if you were a steward of that money. And so, I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad, but the idea that wealthy people are the greedy ones and poor people are not is really not at all how life works. You could be real poor and be playing the lottery all the time because you just want more money. And like, that's, I just want to have more money that I didn't earn and I just want that to come my way. So we just need to be aware that greed comes in all shapes and sizes. Pastors can be greedy. Garbage men can be greedy. Doctors can be greedy. Like, it's anyone and everyone who has a heart can be tempted to greed. And that's why I think Jesus says to everybody, watch out.
Why is greed so hard to nail down? Like you called it a sneaky sin.
Yeah.
How do we not know? Why isn't there a marker that's like, okay, past this point? Like, we even know when we're like the scientific point of when we're drunk, right? The
Right.
blood alcohol content of
Right.
Why is it so hard to nail down greed?
Because I think we're calling balls and strikes on what we think we need. And so we really do think like, well, yeah, like I should have this because this is the kind of life I want. And it gets real subjective, doesn't it? Like if you and I sit down and try to decide how much is too much for one person to have, which is, I think, what socialists love to do. Like, I think that's a ridiculous conversation. And then it gets into things like this. You've grown up in the church long enough. Should you drive a Porsche? Should you have a house, a second home? And so now we start talking about what? Subjectivity. And here's the bottom line. Some people make more money than other people. And because they make more money, they're able to have more stuff. That doesn't make them greedy. It makes, God has gifted us all in different ways. But here's what's required of all of us: a generous heart.
Yeah.
So generosity is actually how we combat greed. So a real clear way for any of us to ask the question, do I struggle with greed, is simply to look at what we've given away. Mm-hmm. And listen, if you don't make much, we could be talking about $10. Like, I'm not talking about an amount, I'm not even talking about a percentage,
Right.
although sometimes I do think that's helpful, but not always. I mean, if you give 10% of $1 million away, or 10% your annual salary is $30,000, you give 10% away, it's definitely a bigger sacrifice for the person making, $30,000, right? But my point in saying all that is generosity is the antidote to greed, and greed says, how much can I keep?
Yeah.
And a steward says, God, what do you want me to give?
Yeah, that's
how do you
good.
want me to be generous? And I want you to read, Dan, from our Bible reading plan today. Would you just read that passage from 1 Timothy 6? Because I love what Paul says here, because I think it provides such beautiful balance and gets out of the zone of subjectivity, which is, am I allowed to drive a BMW or not? Which I think is just, again, such an unhelpful conversation.
Yeah, it's 1 Timothy 6:17. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment.
Yeah. And I love Paul's direction there. Just think about it. It's, if you have a lot, and the truth is, globally, we are people who have a lot.
Yeah.
I have a lot. You have a lot. Most people at our church have a lot. I know not everybody does. I know there's some people who are on the very low end, and I would say I love that Connection Church is a place where both the rich and the poor can worship Jesus together.
Absolutely.
So you don't need to have a lot to be part of us. Just want to make sure that's so clear. But most of us are rich. We're not millionaires, but globally speaking, we have a lot. And so Paul says, command those who are rich to share and also to enjoy what God has given them. Isn't that an interesting juxtaposition of two principles?
Yeah.
Share what you have and enjoy what God's provided. Yeah, that's the zone we're supposed to live on. Enjoy God's gifts and give away what God's blessed you with. It's not either or, it's both and.
The kind of the condition of the heart part of it, 11 verses prior, Paul says, godliness with contentment
is great gain.
Is great gain, right? Yep. That's the heart piece of it, that it's about our perspective, right?
I have that scripture verse that's on the wall in our bedroom. My wife gave me that one year for a gift. One of our friends, Joni Lupoli, Joni is the wife of our keyboard player, Vinny. She painted that for me. Godliness with contentment is great gain. And I think she got it for me because that's something that I need to be reminded of. And that contentment piece in our life, being satisfied with what God has provided. And that doesn't mean you don't invest. It doesn't mean you don't save. It doesn't mean you don't interview for a better job. That's not the conversation. Contentment is a disposition of the heart, just like greed is a sin in the heart. And we just need to be grateful with what God has given us. And part of being content is saying, God, with what you've given me, what can I give away?
I just want to process the thought of contentment while still moving the ball forward.
Sure.
We can be content with a lot, with a little, with a great job, with a job that we don't love and looking for something else. Can you still have friction in your life and yet be content?
Yeah, well, here's what I think is really fascinating. Paul says that he learned the secret of being content, whether he was rich or poor. So we usually focus on the poor part of that side, but Paul actually had to
Be
learn...
content when you have nothing?
Be content when you have nothing. But Paul actually learned how to be content when he had a lot and when he had a little. But we usually focus on the little part. And it's no, there's contentment needed no matter where you're at. And he says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So I just think that idea that you can be content and still want to better things for your family, want to better things for yourself, want to move up in your career. God has made us to flourish.
Yeah.
Now we got to be careful about the prosperity gospel here, which says...
Which would be what?
I give my money and God blesses me. So the way...
they're connected?
Yes, I give to get.
Okay.
That's the prosperity gospel. Sow your seed at Connection Church, and I promise God, so now we're not giving to God, we're actually giving to ourselves. We're actually giving to our own financial glory, not for the glory of God. And that's actually nowhere in the Bible, and there's the prosperity gospel, there's prosperity light, which is kind of that kind of thing, you give so that God will bless you. And I'm no, we give because God has been rich to us first, and he's promised to take care of us. So giving is an act of faith, and that act of faith is saying, God, I trust you, and as I'm trusting you, I'm believing your promise that you're going to provide for me. It's not, all right, God, I'm giving you $100, you owe me.
Right.
That's the heart mentality of the prosperity gospel. That's so dangerous.
And the expectation that I'm going to give this $100, but I'm going to get this back fivefold. Yep. Right? It's a seed.
Right.
So you're expecting a harvest, and I'm all right. I'm giving this, but I need 500 back.
Yep. But here's what Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians 9: that as we give, that God promises to continue to provide more for us to give. Right. So we are actually, and you've heard this, if you've grown up in church, you've heard this 100 times. We are blessed to be a blessing, and as we bless, God enables us to continue to be a blessing. Not we bless and then we can bless ourselves and we can just, all our dreams will come true.
Joe, if we wanted to bless someone with this Second Look podcast set, do you think we should just give it to Liberty Thrift, or do you think we should put it on Facebook Marketplace?
Not answering.
Well, this has been another episode of The Second Look. You can catch this sermon and much more at our website, cometoconnect.com. Have a great week.